Still the best book for people in marketing, people in sales, and people working in business, especially if you're hustling to make money in today's environment. How to Win Friends and Influence People is the best book I've ever read. This is a really old book, guys, on how to build relationships with people, how to understand people, and how to work with people's natural motivation. So there's a couple of major reasons that you should still read this book. When you start this book, you'll start to get the feeling like this is a really old book. They're talking about like Rockefellers. They're talking about really old stuff. But this stuff is timeless and it doesn't really change in business, especially people. People don't really change. So let's be honest about what you're actually going to get out of this book if you read it or if you listen to it like on Audible. So the very first thing that you're going to get out of this book that's going to be the biggest lesson is that the best way to get people to do anything is to ask questions about themselves. People have a natural tendency to want to talk about themselves, to talk about their lives, to talk about what's going on, and asking real questions and genuinely listening and asking follow-up questions is still unprecedented for the best way to get to know anyone. So this book will teach you a lot of examples about salespeople that continue to try to get contracts for years with certain vendors and everything and couldn't get in the door. Maybe got 5 minutes, fell on their face every year when they tried to go pitch, whatever it happens to be. What this book shows you is that if you go into the office instead and you're like, hey, Bob, how are you? How's the kids? Oh, you guys got baseball stuff on the wall. Do you guys sponsor the local Little League team? And you just stop talking to them about business for a minute. Just talk to them genuinely about themselves, their lives, try to get to know them. And then instead of ever trying to sell them anything, you concentrate instead on asking genuine questions about where they're at in the business, what kind of issues they're having, what kind of things they're trying to solve. And then not being so forceful on, well, my product's the greatest product there is, saying, I don't know if our product's a fit or not. Let me ask you a couple of questions and see if this is good. And then if you can actually be real about what products and services you sell and what you're good at and what you're bad at, it's so much more powerful. It's so much more genuine, and it lands and it connects in a way that really works. That's the most important thing that this book teaches you, is how to genuinely ask questions of people, listen, give feedback, and ask follow-up questions. It's the most powerful way to connect and get to know human beings that there has ever been that I've found in my life. That's the best lesson I got from this book. Number 2 is a very powerful lesson on criticism and praise. Criticism, in this book, he says, an entirely wasted effort. You criticize people thinking that it's going to get them to do what you want. And instead, it'll only get them to do the bare minimum of what you want when you're around, and they will resent you for it. Instead, if you praise the behaviors that you find valuable to do, and not praise generally, you praise specifically, that will be the big change in how you're perceived at work. So let me give you an example of specific praise versus general praise. General praise looks like this. Bob, great job last week. So it doesn't mean anything to the other person. It can even be seen as condescending or disingenuous. Instead, if in front of other people, let's say in your weekly team meeting, your 20-minute team meeting, you're going over what happened last week, what's on the agenda this week, you're just getting everybody on the same page, seeing how people's weekend was. You should be doing that, right, if you have teams. If you simply go, hey, everybody, I want to acknowledge that, Bob, you really stepped up last week. We had some people out and you handled stuff that wasn't even normally a part of your job and your vertical. You jumped in, you figured things out. The client was super happy. We were able to land this contract, and it was all because of your work last week. That is specific praise. It does a number of things. Number 1, it elevates Bob to his peers. Good job as a manager. Employee recognition equals employee retention. Number 2 is that you are teaching the other people around them the behaviors that you value as a leader and that you want repeated. So you're getting something out of this too in repeated behavior from the other people that are there. It's a very powerful tool. This book by Dale Carnegie is very old and it's still very relevant to everything else. I try to listen to this book on Audible once a year. And my only goal now, after listening to this for many years in a row, is just to try to hear one new thing that I can use. But those 2 things are the most powerful things that this book teaches. I heavily recommend this book to anybody that's in business, particularly if you're trying to level up in your career Or if you are in the sales and marketing verticals, it will completely change the way that you think about doing business with other people. You'll go from a selling mindset to a curiosity mindset. And if you go to curiosity mindset, then you're going to hear all kinds of things that will be useful, and people will trust you much more because you're coming from a real place of listening to them. So heavily recommend this book to anybody that has not read it. One of the best business books I've ever had the pleasure of trying to get something out of that I could actually use and implement. And I've been able to implement those 2 lessons from this book my entire career. If you've read this one, you want to recommend it to other people, or you have another great book, please let us know so that we can all learn together.